I always say the antidote, like, to lack of intimacy is, there's three P's that I associate with this. It is being present and playful and tapping into our pleasure, right? So it's these things, and this presence piece, we've been really conditioned or trained out of being in our present moment. And for relationships, for connections, because especially in intimacy, we have mirror neurons. In other words, if I'm feeling a certain way, even though I'm not voicing it or expressing it, the mirror neurons, I'm thinking it, I'm emoting it, are perceived by my partner.
So you found it, the soul of connection. If you're succeeding at everything except the relationships that matter most, this is for you. I'm Tressie Yonakawa, brain science, no fluff, real change. I am so happy to be here today with a person who's a little bit different for this podcast in a very good way, because Dr. Anna Cabeca is someone who has worked extensively and has such amazing success with the relationship to self for women. And what this can do is expand everything. And I've always said, because I learned this early on, that we can put up with a lot, we can move through a lot easier when we have a really great relationship with ourselves and each other in a very intimate, sensual way. We can put up with dishes in the sink and different things like that. We can move through hard times easier when our intimacy is amazing. And I think that is something that's missing or wanted and not available because we don't have the tools. And Dr. Anna is the person who has these tools. So Dr. Anna Cabeca, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. And tell me about this relationship with ourselves.
Yeah, well, that's so powerful. Thank you, Tressa. Thanks for being here. I love talking about these things. And as I think about it, it's the relationship with ourselves, but it's like the physiology of ultimate health and quality longevity, right? It's loving your life and feeling loved in your life, right? That is the physiology that we want to create for each of us, both male and female. And I think one of the things that I've definitely seen over the years as we reconnect with that part of ourselves, that non-judgmental, compassionate, in a non-judgmental, compassionate way, like all relationships get better. And it says biblically, experience the peace that surpasses all understanding. There's a physiology to that, right? There's a physiology to that. And so many times we think, oh, well, it's all in my head. I just have to think myself, why can't I get turned on? Why don't I feel, this, that, the other thing, right? Why is this bothering me? Why is this pissed me off? And often it's because we're disconnected. We're disconnected from ourselves. We're disconnected from what we're feeling. Like if we just took a pause right now and just thought, how do I feel in this moment? How am I feeling? How's my energy? How's my passion? What level of joy am I experiencing right now? Just to check in with ourselves. Oftentimes we go through so much of the day without realizing that. And one thing in working with, tens of thousands of women and many couples is that I always tell my client, like, you can't heal a body you hate, right? You cannot heal a body you hate. And
Ooh, pause for like, ooh, like that's intense. And I think that so many of us do not take a moment to pause and take a breath or just pause and ask, how am I doing right now? We're so, what is it? Trained, I guess, to make sure other people are okay so that either they need us or that we belong, or there's so much tied up in that societally and story wise and pattern wise. So just even that moment of how am I doing right now is amazing. So, okay, sorry to interrupt and keep going.
no, I mean, but that's exactly it. It's that check in with ourselves. We're so busy doing instead of being, right? And what do we know from, like, I always say the antidote, like, to lack of intimacy is, there's three P's that I associate with this, like, to make it simple. Well, I say the three D's associated with the lack of intimacy, and dick is not one of them. No, no, no. It's the issues of desire, disconnect, and discomfort. And then the three P's, and again, not penis, no, it is being present and playful and tapping into our pleasure, right? So it's these things. And this presence piece, we've been really conditioned or trained out of being in our present moment. And for relationships, for connections, because especially in intimacy, we have mirror neurons. In other words, if I'm feeling a certain way, even though I'm not voicing it or expressing it, the mirror neurons, I'm thinking it, I'm emoting it, are perceived by my partner, right? And it's the same. It's perceived by our children. It's perceived by our colleagues, people we're working with online, who we're connecting with. If we're not present, if we're not in the moment being, it's reflected in how we're connecting. And I love that you're doing this podcast on connection, right? Because that is key. Right? Again, it's key to everything that I believe in, that I found pertinent to my own health and own journey, and those of my patients especially.
I love that. And everything you're talking about. So I created a pyramid, and it's like, I call it the trust pyramid. And everything you're talking about is resonant with how our cognition works. And my background is in neuroscience, specifically for cognition. So when we talk about cognition, what I've seen is that we want trust to be the foundation of intimacy, of relationships, of all of those things. But trust is really the pinnacle. And trust, for me, what I've seen in 30 years, and what I hear you saying is very resonant, that the foundation for me is presence, like pure presence. Just take a breath and be present. And then from that, we can build emotional safety, right? But you can't build emotional safety if you're not present. There's a gap, there's something missing. So we have presence, emotional safety. And on that is the curiosity, playfulness, because I haven't found that you can build honest, true, real curiosity, playfulness, that the thing that you need for desire and for continuing growth of desire over time, which is what almost everybody says that they lose, right? But you can't have that because you don't have presence, you don't have emotional safety. Now you have curiosity, playfulness, and that's what builds the trust. And those peak options, because they are choices, that's where desire comes from for me. That's where intimacy comes from for most women that I know, especially women that I know. And many men, that they can't be playful, curious, spontaneous, all of those things, if there's something out of whack with their trust, right? So it's very exciting to me to hear you talk about intimacy in exactly the same way that I talk about great leadership and great relationships with couples that I work with. It's very super exciting.
I love it. I love it. And you think of that, emotional safety is so important. That emotional safety is so important. And even couples that have been together for decades, until they can communicate, express themselves, accept where they are, right? Be in the present, right? Be present and embodied, that, they'll be able to then really experience that, right? Experience a new dimension to the relationship, going from roommates to lovers again, or just experience a heightened level of intimacy and connection. And it just, I just love the story that I was telling you before we started about my client who's 74 years old, right? Like, and then she reignited her intimacy after 50 years of marriage. And like, that just gives me so much hope, right?
Right. I have always believed, I wasn't the model that I had, but I've always believed that we can be intimate, have great sex for the entirety of our lives. And it does take intention to do that, because if we let the anxiety, frustration, agitation build up in our relationships, we don't value intimacy anymore. We're just surviving. And so it's a really special opportunity to use the tools that you're talking about, and that we're going to be talking about. I'm super excited about what we're getting into here, because this is a huge solve for one of the biggest problems that I hear about when I work with couples.
Yeah. No, me too. And this, has given me so much hope, because it was funny, Tress. I was being interviewed on another podcast, and the interviewer was like maybe in his late 30s, early 40s, married 15 years. And he's like, well, isn't it normal just to kind of not have intimacy anymore? And then when you think, like, I don't think my parents are having sex and all of this stuff. And so the very, like, it's, passion, like our sexual energy can be transmuted into so many ways, but we can't cut it off. Like, it's a disservice to ourselves and the world when we cut off our sexual energy, when we're not channeling that into passions. Maybe it's into art, it's into mentorship, it's into, all creative ways. And, we do a disservice to the world when we cut that off. And so it was the very next day when my 74-year-old patient was in my office, and I'm like, well, how's your sex life going? How are things going? She goes, Dr. Anna, it's been the best year in the last 50 years. It's the absolute best. And yeah, and because we addressed some of those issues of discomfort that weren't addressed. And, as far as vulvovaginal issues, again, we want to think issues of desire, discomfort, disconnect, what else is going on? Often there's a combination. But so, that was just beautiful, because also it layers into the piece you're talking about, that playfulness, right? That curiosity and playfulness, because now she's like, okay, this is what I'm doing different, sharing this information with her husband.
Yes.
And that it like re-excites them. They're communicating in a way
Yeah.
that is more so intimate. And if you can do that in the bedroom, you can do it out of the bedroom. If you can't do it out of the bedroom, you're not going to be able to do it in the bedroom. So,
Right.
both ways.
Yes. Where I started learning this, I mean, early on was working with leaders who had power but no clarity. And so when we have clarity, then we're not guessing and getting it wrong. So what I've seen happen in on the intimate side of relationships is that my couples will think they know what their partner wants and likes because that's what they wanted and liked when they first got together, or at least said they did. Now, I believe that we are a very porn educated culture, and that what we have seen, how we've been educated, is not accurate to our physiology or our emotional safety or our connection ability. And more people and more younger people, and I'm excited about this. I'm talking with a lot of people in their 20s and 30s who say, I really can't have an intimate relationship with someone that I don't feel emotionally connected to, because they're so burned out on, Tinder and all of the things, where they get on an app, they meet, they hook up, and then they don't really see each other again. And so they're not wanting to be part of that culture anymore, which I'm thrilled about, because that brings them to us. And for everybody listening, don't wait until you're 74. Do this, learn about this as soon as you can, your 20s, your 30s. If you've been dating for somebody for 6 months, understand what Dr. Ann is talking about, because it's so important to how you feel about yourself. And I think a big part of, I lost myself, is here in intimacy as well as in other aspects of our lives. And I'm curious, Dr. Anna, when somebody first comes to you, what do you hear them say most frequently?
Yeah, I think the most common thing that I hear is just that, I've lost my libido. I never want to initiate sex. Like, I'm feeling that disconnect. I'm thinking about a patient I just saw for the first time. She's 53 years old, and she has been married 15 years. It's her second marriage, and she's not able to be intimate because of some pelvic issues she's been having, and that have been she's been circling the globe trying to address. And so we talk about these things, and it's important, like, for me as a physician, been doing this also 30 years, is to hear what's also not being said, right? It's that, that fear of allowing someone else into your life. What's deeper there, when the upper lips aren't talking, the lower lips aren't going to be talking either, right? What else? What else is going on here? And so, in this instance, it's pelvic pain and discomfort, but what are the underlying causes of that too? at, I look at it all way from the physical to the medical to the hormonal to the structural to the psychologic and the relational. There's many components here. I have a
Mhm.
program called Sexual CPR, and I say these are the spokes on the wheel. Like there are many factors that affect our drive for intimacy. Really, we want to address these from a holistic perspective. But there's also the underlying. There's there's a couple camps. Again, we're working with mostly women, midlife and beyond, and so there's this camp that, okay, I'm okay with not having sex, right? I'm okay with not having sex because it hasn't been beautiful or reigniting or connecting. And like we're missing huge hormones, like huge longevity hormones. You don't have to have penis and vagina penetrative sex, right? You can have intimacy, caress, connection in these ways, and full body orgasms can still be
Absolutely.
had, but it that creates this physiologic, like the most important hormone in our body, oxytocin, certainly is a big part of this connection, and that's such a longevity hormone. We want to engage it, and when you see that shift, and you see it all the time, when there's that reconnection, I mean, they're 10 years younger.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Yeah, that's part of my work that I love so much. And for me, people start to find that again and say they have hope within the first 40 minutes usually.
Nice.
Yeah, but it's that clarity and connection that you're talking about. And then they start to get more curious about, oh, well, maybe it's possible for us to have an intimate relationship again, because most people in by their 50s have typically not had intimacy of any kind for so decades sometimes because something was amiss early on, and then egos get bruised, and then agitation comes up, and then we're just like, forget it. And that is a loss such a loss. And it's not that great sex can keep your relationship together, but it can help you weather some of the storms that you wouldn't otherwise without that depth of connection. But it has to be healthy and good. It can't just be the thing that you've been doing since you met when you were 19.
Mhm, mhm.
And so when you're talking, so you work in hormone replacement, you work in the right hormone replacement because there's a lot of stuff out there now.
Yeah, I mean, regenerative medicine, but I always say, I am a hormone specialist. I've been in sexual medicine for a long time, but it takes more than hormones to fix our hormones. So I definitely am very holistic. I'm board certified as an OBGYN and in regenerative and anti-aging medicine and in integrative medicine because I'm like, you cannot take a woman if you take care of a woman if you're not taking an integrative approach. And that has to be part of our um, that has to be part of our medical system in the future. But I think we've got a long way to go to break down some barriers around that. But from studying world medicine and studying relationships, like longevity relationships, the biggest thing, like and I love that curiosity, playfulness, then this pyramid because outside the bedroom, right? Like you see couples that are connected, they have that playfulness. Maybe the hands that's a pat on the buttocks. Maybe it's just like a tease, a joke, a flirtation in the middle of the day. I remember seeing a beautiful couple. They've been married, decades, and he was asking her, honey, I'm going to the bar to get a drink. What would you like your, her usual? And she goes, of course I would. I would. And he goes, I just always want to make sure, just like this. You haven't, like just like some kind of playfulness. And you're like, okay, they've been married so long. He absolutely knows what she wants. And yet there's this between both of them, there's a flirtation, there's a playfulness. Yeah. And I
That's
think that
rare.
makes the
That's
difference.
too rare. Yeah, but how often do you see that in public? And I look for it,
Stands out. Yep.
right? And I was at a in Tokyo at Disneyland, among other things, what I was doing there, and then also in airports pretty much every week. And I always look for that kind of thing. And what I find, the happiest place on earth is why I look for it there. And um, you don't find it there. You find agitation. You find, well, where did you put the passes? Like, don't you have that? You find that pecking.
Yeah.
And when that pecking becomes the norm and it's just how you're talking to each other, It's one agitated brain cell away from yelling at each other in public, which I've also seen. And if you're yelling at each other in public and having that pecking in public, what's it like in private? And I always think, oh man, I wish you guys would understand the tools of how to connect.
Yeah.
And um, when I'm helping put marriages back together or finding out if it's possible, the first thing I implement is playfulness. Why do you even like each other? And sometimes it takes a few minutes to get there because they've gotten so far past even liking each other, but they're together. So they're going to stay together or however that works. And so when you come across that, it's typically what I'm hearing is it's typically the female coming to you for help. Okay.
Yeah.
So where do you get any gendered partner involved in the process, or are they?
Well, I think it's so important, so critically important. When I'm treating someone for sexual health, whether it's male or female first, I want to talk to their partner. It's a partnership, right? And I think this is where our longevity clinics, I saw it because I was a consultant for, oh my gosh, almost 20 years ago now for Cenogenics, one of the first anti-aging clinics, and really big on testosterone in men, 90% of their patients. And I asked them, what's your divorce rate? And it was really, really high. And so you can't treat a single, especially with hormones that are neurologically affecting you, right? Because higher testosterone, higher eye wandering, higher aggressive behavior, higher thrill seeking or novelty seeking behavior because of increasing dopamine as well. So you think, okay, we're doing this for this partner, but we haven't addressed her vaginal dryness, her issues, their communication style. We haven't addressed their, safety, trust, and just big communication, right? And so you've got this further and further divergence in the relationship versus the initial goal was, how do I feel sexier? How am I more of a, am I showing up as my sexy, desirable self for my partner? And it's very like, well, my partner's physiology hasn't changed, so she's not feeling it, but I'm feeling it now towards someone else. And that is when hormones are affecting your physiology. Physiology is affecting your behavior, and that is a sign. Number one, you're on too much, but there's underlying issues that have to be addressed because that just creates a cascade effect. And one of the things you were talking about is that inability to connect and being like the nitpicking, the irritability in public, let alone in private, what's happening. And I say this from huge levels of compassion because I've been there, right? I like the reason I know as much as I do about hormones and restorational health is because like I had to fix myself, right? And my doctor's bag was empty. So I needed to go and figure it out. But it's not just, again, the chemicals that we use, it's the lifestyle we choose and the mindset, the oxytocin increasing behaviors. And I like to say we have to microdose oxytocin throughout the day, and we do it with play, right?
Yes.
With these ways that we increase our natural oxytocin, practices of gratitude, finding the humor in a conversation. Like my dog is barking upstairs. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. She has a lot to say about this subject too. She doesn't want to be left out. Like, let's play. You're talking about play. Let's go play, right? Yeah. And so those are all important aspects.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And your dog barking upstairs is just a part of life. People's kids wander in and need something. That's just like life. And if we do this thing and we're like, oh no, this isn't perfect life, then we're limiting. I think we're self-limiting. So your dog barking is totally great. We love dogs here. And one of the things that you're talking about, with the coupling, when I'm working with a couple and it's all they think it's supposed to be very clinical, therapeutic. I am not a therapist. I work in neuroscience, and a little bit of woo, a little bit of magic. But what I love about what we can do is one of the tools, and for everybody listening, I ask my couples, okay, get up off the couch right now and go outside in your driveway or on your lawn or in your apartment complex, whatever you're doing, and hold hands and spin each other around if you're physically capable, or like throw your hands in the air and jump up and down. Do something that's completely out of your norm for how you live and how you relate to each other. And you go outside, you've got 3 minutes, you have to do it or you can't come back. And in the meantime, you're paying me by the minute, right? So they go out, they do it, and they always come back in laughing and blushing and smiling, and something that is literally, they've accomplished that task in 30 seconds, less than a minute usually. And we just don't give ourselves that space. And when I work with creative teams or, other things, like exactly what you're talking about. And for you coming from, Western medicine, I'm going to say a little bit of Eastern medicine, and longevity and all of these things, you have such a unique focus and ability that some of these pop-up clinics aren't going to have. So what is your advantage in this work? And I love that you had to fix this for yourself too. And
I
that you were
think
trying out this.
I think that's the advantage, right? That's the advantage. It's like the same thing, understanding the medicine, the physiology, the neuroendocrine, immunologic connection. I mean, it's all these aspects that come into play, and then really looking at like how you have the hierarchy for, that hierarchy for intimacy. It's this hierarchy of hormones. It's all our reproductive. I always like to say, give the example of well, our hierarchy of hormones. If you think of all the hormones that get a lot of attention, right? Estrogen, testosterone, melatonin, even vitamin D, a prohormone. All these hormones are like students at a university, right? Each have their own goals, their own purpose, their own direction, their own talents, their own giftings, right? And they're part of this community together. And then you have the professor hormones, and those are adrenaline, insulin, and cortisol. And if those are out of whack, like if your professor comes in high, hungover, whatever, just turns off the light and plays a movie, there is disruption among the student body, right? You are not paying attention anymore. And that is so true with our hormones. If we're becoming more and more insulin resistant, which is natural to do with age, that's where we have to shift our lifestyle and nutrition plan so we can stay insulin sensitive. But if you're becoming more insulin resistant, there's havoc, and there's a tremendous amount of havoc in our hormonal body. And we're also becoming more inflamed. And that's where cortisol comes in, right? This anti-inflammatory hormone, also a hormone of stress. So if that's disrupted, right, it's not our normal, okay, cortisol wakes us up in the morning and then it's chill the rest of the day unless we're being attacked, right? And it can feel like we're always under attack, especially when we had trauma. My story is I had significant amount of trauma, PTSD. And I like to say I have PTS growth, right? I don't have post-traumatic stress disorder, I have post-traumatic growth, but it was PTSD for a long time. But the tools that I learned were about this cortisol piece and how it affects the most important hormone, which is like the dean of the university or the principal of the university, right? That sets the stage for the entire community. And that is oxytocin. I like to consider her the queen mother of all hormones. And so as we work to increase oxytocin, there's many ways we can do it, like dancing, singing, playing, laughing, playing with a pet, getting out in nature, practices of gratitude, philanthropy, giving of your time, tithing, and talent increases oxytocin. And also, I like to say swinging, but I have to clarify, swinging on a swing, not like, like that increases oxytocin. The other may not. So swing, I mean, these are things kids do it naturally.
Yeah.
We have those roundabout, whatever those things are, we have swings and roundabouts because they increase oxytocin. And I got the playgrounds. What's it called? That thing you stand on and goes round and round. I used to love that.
I want to call it a merry-go-round, but it's not what it is. I can't, but
Yeah,
yeah.
but it's like that. Our merry-go-rounds and carousels, all of those things, we love them. And physiologically, it's increasing oxytocin for whatever reason. It does it. And it's a beautiful thing.
I love that. And so the child like, not childish, there's definitely a difference, but the childlike quality is something that I work on with my clients too. And that part of us that we think has to be put away in order for us to be functioning adults is a lie. It's a huge lie. And we lose so much of that. And when I'm out in public and I hear a parent tell a child who's like 3, 4, 5, 6 to stop running or to be quiet or to, I think, oh,
Stop
gosh.
singing. And I was guilty of that with my daughter. We were in a restaurant in LA, and Amira was just, just singing and, and I was like, shh,
Wow.
and a woman called me on it. She's like, no, never stop her from singing. Never stop her from singing. And I, put in my place. I was like, of course, why would I? And why am I doing that? It was lovely to feel that and just like, let her play. She's being in tune with her being and her environment right now. And, yeah.
I love that. And I think though and I'm guilty of that too, early on. I think that the reason we do that is to maintain a certain appearance that we think we have to have, which translates, I think, aggressively into the work that you do, that we're supposed to be always sexually active, always be desirous, always be willing, and that's just not the case. And it's embarrassing for a lot of people to say that.
And it's the truth. Yeah. Yeah. And that vulnerability, it's like that vulnerability, being able to say, okay, this is where I'm at right now, is the way we open the door to healing.
Huge, huge. That is so true. And now you mentioned briefly that you work with men and women, and it surprises me that you work with men. Tell me what you do.
But I like it started really, it started because I was helping women with their hormones. And the woman would come in and say, well, I know I've got this energy and drive, but my husband doesn't. And can you help him? Like, of course, I have board certifications in anti-aging, regenerative, and integrative medicine as well. But, in OBGYN, we treat male infertility too. So, it was addressing the psychosocial and psychopsychological, the issues, the physiologic as well as emotional issues associated with that. And so, for example, I have a client in my practice right now. He came in because his wife sent him, but she's not my patient yet, I'll say, but he's 48 years old with erectile dysfunction and had other aches and pains and everything else. And on exam, high gout, high PSA, we're working all this stuff up. And, it's ultimately inflammation. So we have the issue of erectile dysfunction, which is a red flag for cardiac disease, right? That's a red flag for cardiometabolic. So anyone at any age struggling with, erectile dysfunction, it's a cardiometabolic issue. So we have to address these underlying issues. And then, that's key in my program. My keto green method, which is nutrition and lifestyle method, works as well. I would say if it works for a menopausal woman, it works for everyone very, very well. I mean, it definitely works for men very well, very anti-inflammatory and nourishing to the gut microbiome, which is key. And so these are, that's the reason. And we want to optimize our body's natural production of hormones and ability to use those hormones effectively, as well as detoxify from those hormones or metabolize those hormones out as healthfully as possible. And that's a key part of the optimum health. And we haven't caught on, to be honest. We've come a long way with, more discussion about estrogen and testosterone in women through the social media awareness. Now, it is something I've been working with for 30 years, and it's great that we're using hormones, but you've got to think, am I using them? Am I suppressing the endogenous production, or how can I get her to produce or him to produce more of his natural hormones? We know it with guys. We give them testosterone, it shuts down their testes, and they get testicular shrinkage, and the guys would be like, I don't care, but that's just telling you that it's affecting your own ability. And we stop that testosterone for whatever reason, you have a higher incidence of depression and suicide.
Wow.
So you have to understand what it's doing in the long term to the entire hormonal axis. So the perspective that I've learned over these years is that support your body's natural production, right? Support your receptors' ability to use it, because if there's so many hormone disruptors, estrogen mimickers, or endocrine mimickers that are part of our cosmetic skincare, our nutrition. I mean, just drinking tap water, for instance, have a huge amount of chemical and hormonal disruptors in that. That's affecting your receptor sites. So, the first step is like a hormonal detox. And, I write about it in all my books because it's so critical. So our body's able to use the hormones we are making better and more efficiently, and then eliminating them safely.
What you're talking about is so scary, and we're coming up on our time, but I know so many people, young people in their teens, people all the way through, who talk about just getting tea. So, the access to these chemicals, or what we think these chemicals are, is, I mean, they're available on the internet. I can order them today. But I hear you saying that it's just so important to work with you, or somebody who actually knows what they're doing. Because if kids who are 15, 16, 17 are taking testosterone, they don't know, that it's going to suppress their own ability.
I
It's really scary.
It is scary. I consider that as bad as those 15, 16, 17-year-olds being on birth control pills.
So
I
yeah.
mean, this is like that double edged sword. And I'm a mom of four girls, ages now 18 through 36. So, I've seen a lot now in my 60th year of life. So it, is so important to understand, okay, well, what's happening. And we've known for over a decade that the blue lights from phones, and this is true for men and women, suppresses testosterone, right? It's affecting our natural endogenous testosterone. There's a term for it. It was studied in Japan, and but it looked at young adolescent men and their screen time, and the higher the screen time, the lower the testosterone. And if it's affecting men, it's affecting women too. We know it, right? And I think this is why it's so important to have this conversation. While I take very limited people personally, I've been so um, really passionate about educating, creating the programs, writing the books, creating the products that help us, that we can do on our own, really anywhere in the world. So
Oh my gosh, Dr. Anna, I've had so many like whoa moments talking with you and listening to you. Where can we all find you the easiest?
Well, one thing is definitely, I have a 10-day free program I want to offer your audience from my insider link. So for your audience, go to dranna.com/tribe. So DRANNA.com, that's my website /tribe. And on social at The Girlfriend Doctor. So I'm really am passionate about helping and getting this word out. So we feel empowered and confident, because when you see it, and you've seen it, trust us, so many times, when you see it change one couple's life, or I always say no partner, no problem. When it changes your life and how you feel and how you show up, and it just has a ripple effect that's pretty awesome.
Really awesome. And I've seen the work that you do, ripple effect, wave effect, to create whole new opportunities in work, in growth, in parenting, and everything for people. So I want to say thank you so much for sharing your wisdom in the world with me and with us today. I appreciate you so much, Dr. Anna.
Thank you.
You dove in. This is the Soul of Connection. Subscribe now. Stay close. Your full life depends on it.